Welcome to William Blount's Visible Learning Program. On behalf of Rob Clark, Head Principal, and Abby Rector, Assistant Principal and Coordinator of our Virtual Learning Program, I'm here to guide you through an orientation so parents and students will understand our expectations for our Virtual Learning Program this year. Among the topics that we will cover are what virtual learning is and is not, a virtual student's presence on campus, and our policies regarding attendance, truancy, grades, testing, accommodations, academic integrity, infractions that may result in dismissal from the program, and transitioning back to the traditional pathway. Virtual learning is not a homeschool program where students are not enrolled in Blount County schools and may lack the resources and support they need to progress through their coursework. Instead, your student is enrolled in a Blount County school, and their academic instruction will be provided through a structured, internet-based program called APEX. Each course in APEX is facilitated by a William Blount teacher who is highly qualified in the subject area. That teacher will assign, assess work, and provide feedback about student quality of work and progress towards earning a credit. Our virtual learning program is not lacking in rigor. Instead, our program is tightly aligned to Tennessee standards where your students will earn credits at the end of the term. This means that in general, students have a time commitment of approximately an hour a day per subject, equal to the amount of time that they would spend if they were on the traditional path. Your students' teachers should be contacting you by July 31st. If you're entering this program after this start date, be assured your child's teacher will contact you. The first assignments at the beginning of the year should roll out to your students no later than August 7th. Our virtual students are allowed on campus to participate in sports and extracurricular activities. They're also allowed on campus by appointment if they need tutoring and support that cannot be achieved in other means. While your students are on campus, school rules do apply, including dress code. Absences will happen, even for virtual students. Please know that students are allowed to make up work just like they would if they were on the traditional path. Now, you may be wondering how you can be absent from virtual school and how we take attendance if you're not physically in the building. Students are Blount County students, and therefore attendance counts. Our students in the virtual program are going to be responsible for taking care of their own attendance. The Google Classroom that you joined for viewing this orientation is also the place that your student will come back to every Monday and Friday to complete a Google form that will take care of the attendance. The specific details for this policy are found on pages 3 and 4 in the Blount County Schools Virtual Student Handbook, but briefly, every Monday, a student will return to this Google Classroom and fill out a Google form. That form is due by 11:59 on Monday night, and its completion and submission will grant them attendance for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Your students will return back to this same Google Classroom on Friday and complete another Google form, and submission of that Google form will give them attendance for Thursday and Friday. Students accumulate absences by failing to submit these forms on time or not at all. Because attendance is important to student achievement, specifically, significant absences negatively impact student achievement, the Blount County Schools truancy policy is in effect for virtual students. Details of this policy can be found on page 5 of the Virtual Student Handbook. They can also be found on the Blount County Schools website under Board Policies. But it's important for you to know that the Tier 1 interventions for truancy begin when a student accumulates unexcused absences. Our virtual students need to make sure they are following the policies, filling out the Google Forms for their attendance to avoid triggering these truancy interventions. The grading scale for Blount County Schools applies to our virtual learning students. It's going to be important for you to communicate with your teachers regarding the most accurate place to find grades. Many of you may be used to checking PowerSchool for your students' grades, and that is still the best place to look. However, you're going to find that as you look in Apex, you will see grades. In fact, every Sunday, as a parent, you will receive an email that shows your students' progress to date in their courses in Apex. And a part of that report will include students' grade to date. Please know that the grade on the Apex report may or may not be accurate. The reason for that is the Apex program was chosen to help us provide high quality instruction for your students, but also to provide a way for your student to seamlessly transfer back in to a traditional pathway. And to that end, both the amount of time commitment to the course and the grading weight for our virtual and our traditional path students needs to be very similar. Apex has set weights and point values for assignments that teachers aren't allowed to modify. For some courses, the point value and weighting in Apex is appropriate and in line with what our traditional path students are receiving. In some courses, these weights are not in line. And to make the transition possible for your students to return from virtual learning into traditional, teachers may have to use weighting in PowerSchool. The most important thing you can do, again, is communicate with your teacher. Make sure you understand each individual teacher's policy regarding where the most up-to-date grades are accurate. State tests for ACT and our state-mandated EOCs are applicable to our virtual students, and these tests will be in person. More details will be sent to you as we approach those time frames, but please be aware that virtual students will need to have some form of photo ID as they come in to take these tests. In addition, if your student receives IEP services or has a 504, they are entitled to all the accommodations that are approved on their most recent and up-to-date form. But the Apex program cannot provide those. The teacher will have to provide those. If you have concerns and questions about that, please reach out to both your teacher and your student's case manager or guidance counselor. The foundation of our program rests on academic integrity. And to that end, we have a number of tools in place to help us evaluate the integrity of student work. Our virtual student handbook covers academic integrity, specifically the definition and examples of what would be considered plagiarism and cheating. It is essential that parents and students know what these violations are and the result of these violations, because they can result in dismissal from the program. Please see the virtual handbook that is linked in the same Google Classroom where you're accessing this presentation and ask questions of your teacher or Ms. Rector, the principal in charge of coordinating our program, if you have questions or concerns about this policy. While plagiarism and cheating are one of the things that may lead to dismissal from the program, serious attendance issues, behavior issues, failing 2 quarters in a row are also ways that a student may be on the path to dismissal from the program. Should the administration feel this step is necessary, parents will be notified in writing. While we don't anticipate it, we do have to have structures in place to provide for that. You may find it necessary or proper to transition back into the traditional pathway at some point. For those students who are beginning the year on our virtual path, you have the opportunity to return to the traditional path by August 17th if you find that it's not working for you and your student. In order to return back to the traditional path, a student has to apply to return. The Google form that you would use to apply will be in the same Google Classroom in which you are accessing this slideshow orientation. After August 17th, virtual students cannot apply to come back until we get to the end of a grading period or the end of a quarter. The form to apply will also be available at those times. As we close out our section on policies, we'd like you to know that we have every intention of helping your student be as successful as they can. But students and parents have some things they can do to help ensure that success as well. This is a partnership, and it's going to take all of us to get it off the ground. Students need to know they need to check their email daily. And if they have emails, they should respond in a timely manner. Check their Google Classroom every day for attendance forms and announcements. Your students will be part of not only this virtual learning classroom, but individual teachers will probably send them invitations to course Google Classrooms as well. They should check all Google Classrooms for announcements every day. Students need to make sure they're reading their assignments in Apex and working on their assignments daily. They need to be aware of the due dates, which will be clearly communicated. Always do your best work. When you have questions, reach out to your teachers and don't struggle. We're here to help you, and we're interested and invested in helping you succeed. And students, remember, your goal is to learn, not to simply complete. Parents, ask your students questions about what they're learning. Try to become familiar, at least a little, with the programs they're using, like Apex and Google Classroom. Follow up with your students about their assignments. You will get a weekly report from Apex, so this should help give you some talking points. Your students may need to have a quiet area free of distractions, including cell phones, to be able to concentrate on their work. Managing time and setting a schedule to complete your coursework is essential to not falling behind, and students may need help in establishing that workflow. Also, please encourage your students to reach out to William Blount teachers, just as our teachers are going to ask you to reach out to them. If you have further questions, a Google Meet will be scheduled and posted in this Google Classroom, and Abby Rector can be emailed and ask any questions that you may have that we haven't covered in this brief orientation. We'd like to thank you for participating in the William Blount's first ever virtual learning program. We'd also like to say, please be patient with us. This program is as new to our teachers and our school as it is to your students. We will probably stumble along the way. And if the era of COVID has taught us anything, what's true at 8:30 in the morning may not necessarily be true at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. We'll try to give you updates and announcements as quickly as we are able without overwhelming you. We will post any updates to this Google Classroom where you've accessed the orientation. We welcome you to our program. We look forward to what this new year will bring, and go Govs!